How's it going, everybody? This is Nathan. I'm the sales manager at KIOTI Equipment, and we are a Northern Kentucky and Greater Cincinnati 5-paw premier KIOTI dealer. And today, we are talking about KIOTI's entry to the compact construction world, the TL750. So the TL750 is KIOTI's first model in the compact track loader series. It is an entry for them, but they don't plan on stopping here. There's going to be many models past it. This came out in 2023, but now has a couple different variations. So we're going to talk about that, specs, features, options, and maybe even price, and go from there. This sits in the 75 horse class of track loaders, which is really probably most manufacturers' best-selling model almost across the board. The reason for that is it's the biggest machine you're going to get into that does not have to utilize a diesel exhaust fluid system, which is just extra complication. So I think that's why you see it as the best-selling model for everybody. Dimensionally, it's going to be one of the largest models in that class across the board. It is 10 feet long, just under 7 feet tall, and just under 6 foot wide, but it weighs almost 10,000 pounds, and it's going to compete with a lot of models that weigh every bit of 1,000 pounds less than that. That's going to make it very confident when it comes to picking up things and moving them without the rear end coming off the ground. If we're talking about every single 75 horse model, from simplest to most complicated, this is going to fall on the simpler side. It doesn't have as many electronics or complicated mechanisms, which could be a benefit. You'll have to look at that and weigh that option yourself, but you can start to see that in the track system. So this is what they call a solid track mounted undercarriage, meaning there is no torsion axle suspension or crazy suspension system like what you might see on some other manufacturers. The benefit of that is it's way simpler. Less moving parts, less to go wrong, less wear components. It utilizes a double flange front roller and triple flange idlers across the board, which make it a lot harder to detrack and disperse that weight off of the idlers individually, so they should last longer. And they've done a really good job with clear out here. So if you really dig into this, you can see there's no way for dirt to get inside the machine, and there's a lot of room for dirt to get out of the track. So you should very rarely see a D-track on these. They use a grease tensioner system, so it's very simple to take the tracks on and off, nothing complicated there. All TL750s are also going to come with the wide tracks standard. There is no option for skinnier tracks. These are 15.7-inch wide tracks out of the box. So it doesn't matter if you buy the cab or open station or the Flow Plus or not, this is going to be standard. This loader is what they call a vertical lift machine. Your two styles in this world are what they call radial lift and vertical lift. So radial lift basically means kind of like a tractor bucket. As you lift, the bucket comes back towards the cab. The higher you go, the further back it gets. So if you're trying to load something really high, that means you have to get really, really close to whatever you're loading into to dump into it. A vertical lift machine is going to keep the bucket in the same position forward and back as you go up. So it lets you reach out further, especially if you're loading things like dump trucks. That makes a world of difference. The real downside to vertical lift is that they usually lift less than a radial lift counterpart, but as these machines get bigger and more powerful, that's kind of been made up for in that way. So the lift capacity of this is 2,300 pounds, and they kind of describe that as 35% tipping load in this world. Usually your wheel machines, they'll use 50%, and track machines, they use 35%. So the absolute tipping load is like 6,600 pounds. 35% of that is about 2,300 pounds. That's going to be at almost 11 feet high where the hinge pin is, so that should easily get into a triaxle dump truck, which is kind of a common question we get regarding these. Powering this TL is KIOTI's own 2.4 liter inline common rail diesel. It is the same engine that they have in their RX series tractors that we've had since 2013, so it's been around a long time. We have a lot of faith in it. It's been pretty reliable and problem free. It's also a pretty powerful engine for its displacement. It powers implements in that tractor that really should be too big for that size tractor, but it has no problems doing it. And so we have a lot of confidence in it in this machine. It uses a DPF automatic regen system, so you do not have to use diesel exhaust fluid in it. And the way they have it placed in the engine bay is really nice. They've changed some things and moved some things around specific to the track loaders. But when we get into the maintenance, I'll show you how easy it is to get to everything. All of the TLs also have a integrated screen. It's where most of the controls are seen, but you don't actually operate too many things with the push buttons, which we like. The physical switch gear is just a lot more tactile, and you know when it's on, you know when it's off. You don't have to worry about your hands being dirty or gloves or anything. So the screen's going to show you all kinds of good things, though. You have fuel and regular display with your hours and your operating RPM. There's a backup camera that is standard equipment on all cab models that's built in. And then you've got service menus that let you do things like set a password for the machine or set an emergency contact. It'll show you where all your hours are. And it works hand in hand with the telematics that come free with these. So there's a telematics system that's operated with an app, and you can see where the machine is on a map. You can set a geofence for it. If it has a rollover, it will communicate that and send an alert. So there's a lot of neat things you can do with that. But it's all built in this screen. And the location of the screen is pretty convenient. It's not up on the side, so you don't have to move your head up and down to see it. And it's kind of just built right out of the way. So you just look down and to the right, you can see yourself going in reverse. I think you should sit in one of these and see what the layout is. Another one of the mechanisms this utilizes, and actually something Coyote was really serious about, they said that it was 100% had to be in this machine, was the control system. So these joysticks are hydraulic over hydraulic controls, or they call them hydraulic pilot controls, and that differentiates from the majority of the market. The majority of the market has gone electric over hydraulic controls, which basically means these just talk to a computer that then talks to everything else, instead of these directly linking to the hydraulic system. The benefit of this, besides the fact that it's way simpler and has a lot less electronics involved, you get a little bit more feedback. So you're going to be able to feel the hydraulic resistance back in the joystick, and you're going to have immediate response instead of a little bit of a dead area. If you drive a machine that has an electric over hydraulic control system, you'll notice there's a little bit of a lag, because you're basically going from joystick to computer to control instead of joystick to control. So that's a personal preference thing. This is not going to do some of the things those electronic over hydraulic control systems can. It's not going to have things like switchable ISO to H pattern, automatic high-low, different things that they need those electronics to do, but it is a lot more simple and gives you a lot more precision and feel. It's also less money, which is beneficial. So talking about all these different features, everything you see here is standard equipment. If you get the cab version of the TL750, which we probably sell 20-to-1 cabs over open stations, it's the way more popular model. Everything that we're talking about is not an addition. So LED lights front and back. We already talked about the wide tracks out of the box. Hydraulic quick attach comes standard, and backup camera. The hydraulic coupler already has case drain and a 14-pin electrical connector out of the box. So nothing you see is going to need to be added. And it is also one of the more well-equipped machines on the market. You can't unequip it. So what I've found is this, with all of the additional equipment, is probably close to the same price as most other manufacturers without all the additional equipment. So everything you see here is standard. So when looking at the TL, you're going to notice this one says Flow Plus, and that is actually a different version. When you're looking at these, you're going to have wheel and track, you're going to have cab and open station, and then you're going to have in the Coyote lineup standard Flow, or what they call Flow Plus. I use the term Flow Plus because they do, but also because that Flow Plus, it's not really real high flow, or I don't think it would be fair to call it that. Your standard flow hydraulic setup on this is 22 gallons a minute at 3,350 psi. Your Flow Plus gives you a separate set of 3/4 inch couplers that have 34 gallons a minute, which is huge for a machine in this class, but the PSI actually goes down a little bit to 2,900. Depending on what kind of implement you're going to run, you may actually prefer higher PSI over lower PSI regardless of the flow. We've found that in like the Fecons, we're now a Fecon dealer, their standard flow mulcher that works great on a machine this size needs that PSI to be able to catch back up and to give you the torque to push into those trees without slowing down. So depending on what implement you're using, you may actually prefer the standard flow over the high flow. But that Flow Plus is not a huge cost addition. So we found that people like having the option of using it or not using it. It also comes with ride control when you have the Flow Plus model. So for the very little cost difference that it takes to get to that, most people do go with that model. So in the engine bay, I think is probably one of the Coyote's best features. This is a fresh chassis. They designed it from the ground up, and they have made it extremely serviceable. So with 2 bolts, 17 mil bolts, you pull the entire radiator out and you can get to everything in the engine bay. Even with that radiator in, you can get to all your service items, so like, besides the oil filter. So air filter, computer, all your fuses and relays, hydraulic filter, all of that's right there. But if I swing this radiator out, I suddenly have access to the sides of the engine all the way in the machine. Besides maybe this radiator cooling fan, I don't know what you would have to pull out to get to almost every single component on here. That is way different than how most manufacturers have these, where you open up the back and there's just a wall of components. So getting to anything on the inside is just a nightmare. They've also done some cool stuff with the 26-gallon fuel tank. It's actually 2 saddle tanks that sit down on the side, so you don't even really have those in the way. And if you had to pull a tank, it wouldn't be a big deal to do it. On the underside of the machine, there's a bunch of access panels to clean and drain everything, but it also makes it really easy to get to almost every component. On the front of the machine, we have a tilt-up cab that shoots up almost 90 degrees. It also just uses 2 17 mil nuts on studs in the cab, so the whole cab has pistons that help you, and it shoots up 90 degrees, and you have the entire hydraulic system at your fingertips. So you will see every component laid out basically next to each other, so you shouldn't have to take anything out to get to anything on there either. And you actually have the front of the engine access on there as well. So this might be the most serviceable and easy to work on machine on the market. Inside this hydraulic system, I want to point out a couple of things. So obviously everything's super exposed, easy to get to, but Coyote made a really big deal about all of these test ports here. So every single mechanism has a test port on it, and it is accessible right from the outside, which means that diagnosis is way easier. I mean, when you're talking about a hydraulic system, it's like a circulatory system in a body. Everything has oil flowing through it in different directions, and it's one thing after the next. So if you have a failure of a component, you may not be able to tell if it's the component or the one before it or the one before that. So when you have test ports, you can very easily just plug and play and test every access point to find where the failure is, which for us makes things easier, and for you makes things cheaper once this is out of warranty. It's very easy to diagnose and repair. As far as service and maintenance, they've also made everything really easy to access there. We've got our normal loader side access grease fittings all the way down. The hydraulic oil fill is done from the exterior, and the oil check for the hydraulic is actually done inside the cab. There's a sight glass, as well as everything else in the engine bay, really easy to get to. So that's kind of a normal Coyote thing that we've come to expect, but it's not the case on everybody's machine. You should look at it. All the TLs are also a 2-speed travel machine. That's just a push button on the joystick. It's going to get you up in high speed about 7 miles an hour, so they're pretty quick. When you're looking at implements for these, all you really have to think about is size and weight dimensionally, and then hydraulic flow. But in terms of hooking up, this is universal skid steer quick attach, and I think that's something that every manufacturer has finally agreed on. I don't know of anybody that doesn't use that same system. So everything you look at for the skid steer world will hook right onto this. In terms of dimensions, you really need to be at a minimum about 6 feet wide, because the machine is just under 6 feet wide. So just to stick out past the track width, you should be at least 6 foot. So you're going to run 6 or 7 foot grapples, blades, things like that. In terms of weight, you should probably keep your implement weight at or below 1,000 pounds, just so you're not, you know, using something that really is going to take all of your lift capacity to use. And in terms of hydraulic flow, this is not using anything weird there either. So you have half-inch flat face couplers and 3/4 inch for your high flow outlet. And in terms of hydraulic flow requirements, if you're using something like a cold planer or something that just needs a whole lot of speed, your Flow Plus unit's going to be able to use those. But in terms of standard flow, things like this standard flow Fecon work great. Standard flow rotary cutters, up to like 7-inch cut capacity. We have a ton of different implements. We're a full-fledged dealer for like 3 different implement companies. So if you're looking for anything to package with these, or if you have any questions for things that might be compatible, just give us a call. We're happy to help you out. Last but not least, I think probably the most important thing, or one of the biggest things Coyote's really come out swinging with, is the warranty. So the warranty on this from the factory, and this is not an extra purchase or something that we've added, it's universal across all Coyotes, is a 3-year bumper to bumper with a 3,000 hour limit. That is a year and 1,000 hours more than almost everybody else, and it actually has some extra inclusions as well. I think because Coyote knew that most of their dealers are tractor dealers and they don't have full-fledged giant construction operations, they include things like local pickup and delivery free of charge. They pay the dealer for that. And they also have loaners given to us to let us use for if somebody has a machine that's out longer than, you know, a few days. So that's not something that is actually written into the warranty for almost anybody else, and it's very, very valuable, especially if you're using these things to produce income. We also have really taken a lot of steps as a dealership to make sure we are ready and prepared to service these the way they really should be. So we've bought a service truck, we've bought bigger trucks to move these around, and we've invested in extra employees just to make sure these are in the field working. And I think that's a really big deal. When you're shopping these, you should shop a dealer just as much as you shop a machine. As far as price, I think that you should definitely look on our website at kittenequipment.com, and you're going to see a lot of you know, very detailed pricing. We don't advertise MSRP, we advertise where they actually sell, and I think you're going to find this is extremely competitive. I'm not going to say exact numbers because this could change next year or the year after, but you should check us out and you'll see current real pricing. That is everything on the KIOTI TL750. I know that was a long one. Thank you for sticking with me through that. There's a lot of information on these. If you have any questions that I didn't answer, feel free to stop by either of our 2 locations in Northern Kentucky. We have one in Dry Ridge and one in Independence, or visit our website at kittenequipment.com, where we always keep current pricing and all the programs for these. Stop by and talk to one of our sales guys. We have demos available. We love to set those up with these, and we'd love to see you. So I appreciate it, and have a good one.